And you also interviewed the defendant, correct?
Yes, I did.
And how many times did you interview her, and for how long?
I interviewed Ms. Clancy on 2 occasions. One was on the 29th of May of this year, and the other was the 4th of June. I believe on the 29th of May, I interviewed her for approximately 6.5 hours. And then the second time in June 4th, it was about 5 hours.
And were those interviews in person or on Zoom?
They were by way of Zoom.
And why were they by way of Zoom?
For personal reasons, I was unable to travel at that time, and so I requested the ability to have an interview by way of a Zoom video platform, and that was approved.
And did you find that doing the interviews by Zoom inhibited your ability to evaluate Ms. Clancy in any way?
Well, I think there are always limitations when one is not physically present, when one is seeing someone in a video setting. Sometimes it takes longer to be able to get information and establish rapport. Other limitations are just having an opportunity to see the environment, that the individual is in. I have done evaluations in the past using a Zoom format. There are certainly advantages to being in person.
Did you, in your interviews with Ms. Clancy, have any difficulties having her answer questions or establishing a rapport with her?
No, she was very pleasant, very responsive to questions that I asked on both occasions.
Were there any benefits to doing the interviews on Zoom?
Well, one benefit that one doesn't always have with an in-person evaluation is that a platform like this can also save the entire interview, and both video of the interviewer, myself, but also Ms. Clancy. So if someone wants to really understand the interview and how it went, you not only have a transcript, but you have a video that really demonstrates the course of the interview, how it went, and that can be very helpful. That can be more helpful than if, as a clinician or as an assessor, I am writing notes. Because when you're writing notes, sometimes it's harder to be able to attend to the individual. So certainly being able to have a transcript of the interview is helpful, and I think it makes the process more transparent as well, which I think is a positive.
As part of your evaluation in this case, did you also interview what's known as collaterals, or other people who knew the defendant?
Yes, I did.
Who did you interview?
Well, I interviewed Patrick Clancy, also on a Zoom platform.
And after you had reviewed all of the records that were provided to you, and the criminal file and all the evidence that was provided to you, and conducted these interviews both with Ms. Clancy and Patrick Clancy, were you able to conduct an analysis of all of that material in order to come to your eventual conclusions?
Yes.
And if we could just go through your analysis of this case, and if we could start with I think what you called in your report, Ms. Clancy's characterization of the command auditory hallucinations?
Yes. So Ms. Clancy stated to me and some other evaluators that her hallucination, that of an external voice, something coming from outside of her head, occurred when she was standing at the refrigerator. She said that she was in the process of making her children their dinner when she received a call from Patrick Clancy, returned the call, and then as soon as she finished the call with Patrick Clancy, she said that is when she heard the voice. This is your last chance. You have to kill your kids and then kill yourself. And so that was what she told a number of us. There are also other accounts that she made to individuals that were quite a bit different. To Dr. Spinelli, for example, she said that the voice happened at 5:10 or 5:15 p.m. as soon as Patrick Clancy left on his errands, and that the voice. She described the voice to Dr. Spinelli as kind of increasing in intensity, but saying, "This is your last chance. You have to kill your kids before you kill yourself." But also that it was that her children would suffer if she did not do that. When I asked her about the voice that she heard, again, she said that it started really right after the telephone call at 5:34 with her husband, Patrick. And she said it was a man's voice. It was very clear. It was external. In other words, it came from outside of her head. That it was constant. So this phrase, "This is your last chance. You have to kill your kids and then kill yourself," was something that was repeated over and over and over and over again during that period that she strangled her children. And then just as soon as it had started, it stopped at when she had finished killing the children, strangling the children.
Doctor, was there anything about what she reported to you about the voice that was significant to you in your evaluation, and if so, why?
Well, what was significant to me is that she had not spoken about hearing voices before that in any of the mental health professionals, the psychiatrists, the nurse practitioners, the physicians and staff in the emergency departments or at McLean. And so this was the first time that she reported that was documented, but also that she experienced an auditory hallucination, according to what she told me. So that was unusual. And then also, what was very unusual was the fact that the voice stopped with the death or the strangling of her youngest son, Callan, and that she went upstairs and then proceeded to engage in behavior in an effort to kill herself, but that the voice had stopped as soon as she had strangled her last, Callan, her youngest child.
If I could stop you there for a moment and ask you, you said that it's unusual that this was the first time that she had heard this voice. Why is that unusual?
Well, she had certainly suffered with symptoms of mental illness, depression and anxiety, most specifically. Anxiety that she had reported to Dr. Tufts in mid-September, and then certainly symptoms that later on included suicidal ideation and also what she said were dark or intrusive thoughts to harm her children that she mentioned to her husband and her mother on, I think, 2 occasions.
And Doctor, you also mentioned that it was unusual that the voice stopped after Callan was killed. Why is that unusual?
Well, I've worked with, compared to other patients that I've treated who have had command auditory hallucinations.
I'm going to object to that, Your Honor. Same objection that was raised before.
Counsel, can I see it?
Doctor, based on your training and experience in dealing with diagnosing and treating people who have psychosis and what you've learned in all your training and schooling, is it typical for someone in psychosis to hear a voice only one time, never before, never after?
No.
And again, based on your training and experience, is it typical for someone in psychosis to hear a voice that's constant rather than intermittent?
No, that is not typical.
And what does it mean, the difference between a constant voice and an intermittent voice?
Well, an intermittent voice would come and go. It wouldn't necessarily just keep playing over and over again as if it were on a tape, which Ms. Clancy told me that it was a voice. It's the same thing in the same tone, repeated over and over and over until she had strangled Callan.
And is it typical, based on your training and experience, for someone to hear command hallucinations and then for them to stop abruptly?
No. Committing the act is not curative of the voice. I've not ever seen that.
And Doctor, based on your training and experience, someone in psychosis hearing a voice without accompanying delusions, is that typical?
That is that would be pretty rare. It's absolutely not typical.
And in talking to Ms. Clancy, did you speak to her about the concerns she had that if she had voiced thoughts of harming her children to providers, medical providers, that her children would have been taken away?
Yes.
And did you see that as a delusional thought?
No. Certainly with the requirements that healthcare professionals have to report any issues that could cause harm to children, for example, as required reporters, it's very rational for her to be concerned that by voicing her thoughts of harm could cause her children, certainly an assessment and a rapid assessment and a determination about how best to keep the children safe. So I didn't see that as irrational, but rather rational, just understanding the healthcare system.
And when reviewing the records and speaking to Ms. Clancy, did you see or notice any delusional statements or beliefs surrounding the hearing of that voice on the 24th?
No, I didn't.
Now, based on your training experience, is it typical for someone in psychosis to hear a voice and immediately act on it?
No.
And why is that?
I'd like to have a Dobia hearing at this point, Judge, on this. I'd like to test his qualifications to this.
I'm going to, same objection, same ruling.
So your opinion is it's not typical, correct?
Correct.
Now, you mentioned the defendant told you that when she received the call from her husband at 5:33 and called him back at 5:34, that she was getting dinner ready for her children, correct?
Yes.
And did she tell you what she was about to get out of the refrigerator?
Yes, she said she was at the refrigerator and that the refrigerator door was open and that she was getting chicken nuggets out of the refrigerator section for her children.
Now, in your collateral interview with Patrick Clancy, did you learn from him that when he left the residence, the children were already eating chicken nuggets on the couch?
Yes.
And did Patrick Clancy tell you that Dawson in particular was eating chicken nuggets and green beans out of a bowl on the couch?
Yes, that's what he told me.
And is it fair to say that there are crime scene photographs showing a bowl on the couch?
Yes.
And so is there any significance to you in the defendant telling you that when she got the phone call from Patrick, when he's at CVS, that she's making chicken nuggets versus Patrick and telling you that that had already happened and the crime scene photos showing you the bowl was already on the couch?
Well, it's inconsistent.
And are inconsistencies like that important in your evaluations in cases like this?
Yes.
And how so?
Well, looking at someone's mental status at the time of an offense, it's important to understand what was going on in their mind at the time. And in this case, the widely divergent reports from Lindsay Clancy versus her husband Patrick raised questions about what she is telling me and how things are happening. So certainly that's a cause for significant concern. One of them is not correct in their statement.
And in terms of what you testified about earlier about the defendant giving you one version of what the voice told her and giving Dr. Spinelli a different version of what the voice told her, is there any significance in your evaluation to that?
Yes.
And what is that?
Well, again, it's markedly inconsistent. Ms. Clancy was very clear with me about the time that the voice started and that it was constant for a period of time until the children were killed, and then it stopped. And according to Dr. Spinelli's report, Ms. Clancy stated that the voice started much, much earlier, actually when Patrick Clancy left. And so we're talking about a significant difference in time. And those two just, they don't match. So it's hard to, which version is the one that I should consider.
Now, further along in your analysis, you talk about Ms. Clancy's outward portrayals misleading her family and providers. What do you mean by that, and what did you see in the records and in your interview of her?
Yes. Well, in looking back at her history, for example, with Patrick, she dated Patrick when she was in nursing school, and that was at a time that she was experiencing fairly significant anxiety, according to her, such that she went to a psychiatrist and was treated for her anxiety with Prozac and Wellbutrin and also propranolol. And this was for a fairly significant period of time during their dating, approximately a year. And when I spoke with Mr. Clancy, and also in other testimony and collateral information, he was completely unaware that she was experiencing mental health symptoms at that time that they were dating, or that she was taking medication. And he said he did not learn that she had taken medication, mental health medication, Prozac, Wellbutrin, those are both antidepressants, as well as propranolol, which helps with anxiety, particularly with the kind of presentations that she was doing. But he was unaware until during this time that she was having, great difficulty, November, December time period.
And that's of 2022?
Yes. But there are other aspects too where her portrayal misled others in terms of how she was doing.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yes. Well, in the numerous text messages, which really varied, there were times when she stated that she was doing very well. And for example, even in the days leading up to the 24th of January 2023, the photographs that she was sending on Instagram and the like really portrayed something very different than what she later stated was going on inside. With regard to providers, Ms. Clancy told me that during this period that she was having such difficulty, and that was really starting in October. She started taking medication in October. Ms. Clancy told me that she was having a real difficulty with some symptoms and anxiety and the like. Her mother-in-law suggested to her that there was a doctor that she knew named Rose who was willing to talk with her just on an informal basis. And so as I understand, this doctor made time for her to be seen, not in an official way, not as in a doctor-patient relationship, but just to get an understanding about Ms. Clancy's problems. And that this doctor recommended Lamictal or lamotrigine as a medication that could be very helpful, with regard to the depression she was experiencing, the issues with mood and the like. And so, in looking at Dr. Tuff's notes, there is a note, I believe, on December 1st of 2022, in which they discuss Lamictal as a real possible medication. And then by mid-December, it was really a very, very difficult time. The whole month of December, in many ways, was very difficult. But after this experience.
Yeah, we have a question.
So you've talked about the defendant seeing the provider named Rose and getting the recommendation for Lamictal, the defendant talking to Dr. Tufts about the Lamictal. Was there another provider that she talked to about Lamictal?
Yes.
And who was that?
That was nurse practitioner Gelada. And
eventually was Lamictal prescribed by one of these providers?
Well, really by both. And when you say talking, it was a written communication and not a verbal one.
And so could you tell from the records whether or not Ms. Clancy filled the prescription for Lamictal?
Yes.
What is Lamictal?
Lamotrigine is actually, Lamictal is an anticonvulsant that was approved for bipolar disorder back in the early 2000s, I think 2003, for bipolar disorder. Now it's used for epilepsy, but also been found by the FDA to be extremely helpful in depression related to bipolar disorder.
And after receiving the 3 recommendations to try Lamictal and the prescription from Dr. Tufts, which she filled, did the defendant tell you whether or not she took the Lamictal?
She told me that she had decided not to take the Lamictal because she was concerned about the potential for a rash, a serious rash.
And the fact that 3 providers recommended this medication to help her and the defendant chose not to take it because of the potential of this rash, was that significant to you in any way in your evaluation?
Yes.
And how so?
Well, Dr. Tufts had written the prescription and it had been filled. Actually, Nurse Gelada also wrote a prescription for the Lamictal, and Ms. Clancy told her, well, you can cancel that because I already have a prescription of Lamictal from Dr. Tufts. What was concerning was that I don't see evidence that Dr. Tufts was notified that she had decided against the Lamictal. And so that would have given a provider an opportunity to think about something else that also could help in this domain. But yet Ms. Clancy had decided not to take it, but also not to tell the doctor that she had decided not to take it.
Well, doctor, was there also something that you noticed in the way she described, Ms. Clancy described to you, how she was feeling at McLean Hospital when she was there versus the description of her feelings in the McLean records?
Yes.
And what was the difference between the two, and how was it significant in your evaluation?
I recall that she told me that her she felt like a zombie. Was very, very significantly affected, and certainly while the records at McLean demonstrate that she was not doing well, there were differences in terms of how she characterized that.
And when a patient is characterizing how she felt at a certain time in different ways, one to you and in a different way to her actual provider at the time, is that concerning in any way?
Well, yes.
And why is that?
Well, the more candid a patient can be with the symptoms that they're experiencing, the better able the prescriber is to make a determination about how best to treat those symptoms. And also it can be very helpful in diagnosis as well. And
did you also take note of the appointment Dr. Tufts had with the defendant on January 23rd, 2023 in the records, and the fact that the defendant denied experiencing suicidal or homicidal ideation in that meeting?
Yes.
And how was that significant, if it was?
Well, Ms. Clancy had been looking into alternative treatments and had discussed with Dr. Tufts earlier the potential for esketamine. This is an FDA-approved medication that has to be administered by a doctor within a facility, but it can have rapid positive effects in treating depression. And so in that note, Dr. Tufts wrote that the potential for esketamine treatment or transcranial magnetic stimulation were ones that they were exploring.
Well, Doctor, did you discuss with Ms. Clancy, or did she describe to you in any detail her ability to suppress her feelings and kind of mold her behavior into what she wanted people to see?
Yes.
And what did she tell you about that?
Well, I believe it was a Christmas time with her family, a morning breakfast, in which she stated she was not feeling well, not doing well, but yet felt the need to act like she was cooking and helping her husband cook. And she questioned why she would do that or engage in that behavior when her family knew that she was struggling and having difficulty. So she used the word fake with regard to just how she was attempting to present to her family. So this was on reflection in talking to me about that behavior at that time.
And did she also tell you about an incident at Spalding Hospital when she was interacting with a friend of hers who was visiting there after she went to Spalding Hospital for rehabilitation?
Yes.
And what did she tell you about that?
She told me that this friend who visited was a longtime friend from when they were both really quite young. And that when this friend visited, Ms. Clancy engaged in, trying to remember how she characterized it, gossip, really talking about kind of the old times and catching up basically on news that this friend, I believe her name was Amy Bevins, they had similar or shared experiences. And so Ms. Clancy told me she was upset at Spalding Hospital because this superficial conversation that she had without discussion of the incident of 24 January 2023, that gave an impression, maybe a false impression of Ms. Clancy, and that it hurt the friendship as a result. And she felt that Spalding Hospital had they provided better psychiatric care, better mental health care, she would not have been so superficial in talking with her friend.
Did she also express anger to you that the staff at Spalding had prioritized her spinal cord injury needs over her mental health needs?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Did Ms. Clancy tell you or express anger to you that the staff at Spalding Hospital had prioritized her spinal cord injury needs over her mental health needs?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to put into evidence excerpts from the Spalding records showing the mental health consult and treatment of Ms. Clancy.
Objection.
That may be admitted.
294. And so, Doctor, did you have an opportunity to review the Spalding records?
Yes.
And did you see in the Spalding records that not only a psychiatrist, but also a psychologist and a social worker met with Ms. Clancy while she was at Spalding multiple times?
Yes.
And is there anything about the inconsistency of Ms. Clancy telling you that she didn't receive that treatment or that focus at Spalding versus the record, what the records show that are significant in your evaluation of her?
Well, it's inconsistent and doesn't match up with that collateral information. So her depiction of the lack of mental health care at Spalding didn't match up with the evidence Spalding in terms of the documents. Spalding is a rehab hospital, and that is really, they were really concentrated on the spinal injury, but also did have mental health services available.
And Doctor, moving along in your analysis, did you look into and evaluate the defendant's decision to send Patrick Clancy on errands on January 24th, 2023?
Yes.
And what stood out to you as significant in what you learned from the records and from Ms. Clancy herself in that area?
I asked Ms. Clancy to tell me about that that afternoon, and specifically that decision for takeout. And as I recall, she told me that she texted her husband Patrick basically to say, what would you think about having takeout? It's been a long day. It's a fairly broad, open-ended request, and that he responded positively, and from then she made the arrangements to look up the distance between their home, and 3V restaurant in Plymouth, but also looking at, basically making plans to have the food ordered. And she had texted her husband ultimately and asked him about, to tell her what order to make. And so in looking at the record, it was really reversed. Instead of starting with asking her husband, what would you think about takeout? How about getting takeout? The record shows that Ms. Clancy did a lot of searching prior to that in terms of 3V, the distance, and the like. So there were a number, getting information prior to requesting a text, sending a text to her husband. And in the text, rather than saying, what would you think about takeout, getting takeout, she said, how about getting takeout at 3V? I am, it's been a long day, etc. And so this reversal, in terms of what she told me, and what actually we see in the collateral, I thought was significant.
How so?
Well, she told me that the only restaurant that she could think of, could remember about getting takeout was 3V. And Patrick told me that they had never gotten takeout from 3V. He named West End Grill and Chestnut Grill as places that were in Duxbury and close by that they liked and that they often got takeout from. They had been to 3V and they liked it. They had gone as a family, but they had never gotten takeout there, takeout from 3V. And so presenting not just the idea of takeout, but how about 3V? And she had already done lots of checking about distance and the like. I thought was inconsistent what I saw from the record was not what she told me in terms of the order in which she made those decisions, and so I saw that as being significant.
And was there a similar scenario with the request of Patrick from the defendant to also go to CVS?
Yes.
And so what was the difference between what she told you about the plan to go to CVS and, or what she told Patrick, and what she had done in terms of research?
Well, the research for, I think it was Miralax, which was suggested for Cora's constipation. They had an appointment that morning in pediatrics, and this was suggested that the Miralax and CVS was something that Ms. Clancy looked into sometime after 4 o'clock, but not long after 4 o'clock, and well before she contacted her husband. But that she did not communicate to her husband the importance of picking up Miralax at CVS, who she had called, until really right before he left. So he had planned on going to 3B, driving to 3B, almost 6 miles, to get the takeout. And then she also added on that other errand right before he left.
And so was it significant to you that she had researched the Miralax and looked into CVS an hour before, but just added that that part of the errand on right before her husband left?
Yes.
And why?
Well, it lengthened the trip. It added one extra obligation for Patrick, and that would make for a longer time that he was away.
And moving along in your analysis, you discuss Ms. Clancy's suicide attempt, and you say that it was serious, but required sequential decision-making. Is that correct?
Can you just repeat that? I'm
Sure.
sorry.
In your report, you describe Ms. Clancy's suicide attempt as serious, correct?
Correct.
And you also state that it required sequential decision-making. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about why you found that it was serious and how you found that it required that sequential decision-making?
Well, I think in looking over her records previous to that day, 24 January, she had contacted Aspire twice, a suicide hotline, and spoken to them. And really, as I recall, since early December had been speaking about suicidal ideation. So this was something that that was significant for her. There was, of course, an assessment at, in the emergency department on the 15th of December. So you look through the record and that you do see that she was concerned about self-harm and suicidal ideation. If we look at the actual day after the children were killed, or after the children were strangled, Callan was still living at the time that EMS arrived. She told me that she got a knife from the butcher block in the kitchen, and then went upstairs and attempted to cut herself. That she also took pills or took an overdose. And I asked her about that, really trying to understand.
Objection as to what he was trying to understand.
No, overall.
Really to try and understand how she accomplished the overdose. Because if you're swallowing lots and lots of pills, that can be difficult. And so essentially how many handfuls of pills did you take or whatever? And then she told me that she had slashed the screen and dove out of the window.
Doctor, if I could ask you a question. In terms of taking the pills, what did Ms. Clancy tell you about how she took the pills?
I'm sorry?
What did Ms. Clancy tell you about how she took the pills?
It wasn't really very clear. I was.
Objection. Requesting what she said is the question.
Do you recall what she said?
I'm sorry.
Do you recall what she said about taking the pills, whether she took handfuls or did something else?
Oh, she did not say that she took handfuls. She did not describe the overdose in any specific terms.
Did she tell you anything about crushing up pills?
Objection. Leading question.
It's already been answered. Next question.
Did she give you any other information about taking the pills?
No.
Now, if you could tell us that portion that I asked you about earlier, what is sequential decision making, and how did you see that in her behavior?
Well, as I mentioned, she, after strangling the 3 children with the exercise bands, she went up the steps, went to the kitchen, she got a knife, and then ascended yet another group of steps to her bedroom, to their bedroom, and described the attempt or cutting her wrists as well as her neck, and also described the overdose in barely. It was just hard for me to get a good idea about how specifically the overdose occurred, what she did, but she omitted some things that I thought were significant.
And what things did she omit that you think were significant?
Well, she omitted the fact that she had actually crushed the pills. And I found that to be, quite significant.
And how did you learn that she had crushed the pills?
I learned after interviewing her husband, Patrick, and he went through that evening and talked about coming to the home and the like, and mentioned that on the bedside table there was a wine tumbler with powdered medication, crushed up medication, that there was still some in the wine tumbler. And I had not heard, she had not told me that she had actually crushed the medication. And I know that in Dr. Resnick's report, and also in what Lindsay Clancy told me, that she had lemonade in that wine tumbler when she took the overdose. And when I asked Patrick Clancy, he told me that they did not have, he didn't think they had any lemonade in the house, that was not typical at all.
And doctor, what is the significance?
Finish, please.
I'm sorry, were you not finished?
You done with it? Hold on. You
Yes.
done with that answer? All right. Next question.
And so, doctor, what is the significance to you, if anything, of this atypical use of lemonade and the crushed powder in the cup?
You say what is atypical?
I think you just said that Patrick Clancy said it wasn't typical to have lemonade, correct?
Correct.
So is there any significance to you to the fact that there was lemonade in the cup and that there was powder residue in the cup? Or straight that, was there any significance to the fact that Lindsay Clancy told you that there was lemonade in the cup and that Patrick Clancy saw powdered residue in the cup?
Yes, it made sense that lemonade would be in the cup if you're trying to take an overdose of medication that you've crushed, just because of the bitterness that these pills have. So that made sense. I asked her more about the lemonade, and she told me that it had been in the wine tumbler from the night before.
And in terms of the decision-making process, like what types of decisions is she making? Are you referring to, what to take and how to take it and when to take it and when to cut herself, those types of decisions?
Well, crushing pills is really a challenge if you don't have the right equipment, if you don't have like a mortar and a pestle that they might have in a pharmacy. And so what I wondered about was that process of crushing the pills to the point that they were powder in order then to put them in lemonade and then drink them. And so that is, to crush pills, significant number of pills into fine powder is not an easy thing to do, particularly if you don't have the right equipment. It's just kind of a laborious process. And she also did not, it was Patrick Clancy who told me about the door being locked, and she told me she did not recall locking the door.
And in terms of Ms. Clancy's ability to execute the strangulation of her children, is there anything about how she did it, what she did, that stood out to you in your evaluation?
Yes.
And what is that?
Ms. Clancy told me that she, after the phone call with her husband, she returned the call, that was when she took Dawson down the steps into her husband's office to strangle him. And I asked Ms. Clancy about what she remembered about what she said to Dawson to get him to go down the steps and leave, his sister and brother upstairs. And was there resistance, verbalization, et cetera, crying? And she said she could not recall that. She could only recall bringing him down the steps and then strangling him. And then she repeated that. The next child was Cora, that she went back upstairs and did not recall how she got Cora down the steps, how Cora came down the steps, but then brought her into a different area, kind of a living room area in the basement, and strangled Cora. And then lastly, that she went up to get Callan. And I asked her, I said, where was Callan upstairs? And she said, well, maybe in a playpen, often, she said she couldn't really remember, but then bringing Callan down. And he was the last child to be strangled, all during this time where this voice is over and over again saying, this is your last chance. You have to kill the children before you kill yourself.
Doctor, is there any significance to the fact that this voice is telling her to kill the children, but not telling her how to kill the children?
Yes.
And what is that?
Just like adults, children have a will to survive, strong will to survive. I think it's just part of being human. And so I know that Dr. Resnick described Ms. Clancy as acting as if she were a puppet, but the children are not puppets. And just in looking at the Cape Codder video where Ms. Clancy is holding Callan and Dawson and Cora are there, I mean, they both are active. They can walk, they can run. And so to make the determination about
I'm going to object to this.
All right, can I see counsel at sidebar?